Hey guys, I am Sharon Tillman here, and welcome to another episode of A Journey to Identity. Thank you guys so much for just going on this journey with me. Thank you for allowing me to share my time and my story with you guys. I appreciate it so much. And again, in me telling my story, sharing my journey with you, I am hoping that it is awakening something on the inside of you so that your journey can now start to come alive, so that you can see your journey more than something that you've gone through or something that you're currently going through or something that has happened to you, right? Because I think sometimes we even look at our journeys, we look at our life, right? And our past and all of the things that have happened, and we look at it as something that has just literally happened to us. It's like this has happened to me in my life. And sometimes we live in that place of because it's happened to us, this is the way that we have to be. This is the way that we have to show up. I am who I am because of this. I act the way that I act because this happened to me at some point in my life. And we never get to live on the outside of this had to happen to me because, right? And I know it sounds crazy, right? It may sound crazy to the average person, right? Because you go through some things that can be traumatizing, you go through some things that can be really hurtful, from abandonment to rejection to infidelity, which is something that I experienced within my marriage. You can go through like hurt, ridicule, backbiting, people just treating you really wrong for no apparent reason. You can grow up without your parents. You can grow up without your mom or dad being present. Like there are so many things that we can experience in this life that has such an impact on who we become. It has such an impact on how we show up. But until we're able to allow God to illuminate that thing on the inside of us for His glory, our story is just a story. It doesn't become a journey until we're allowing God to allow us to live on the other side of it, right? Not living in that space of being a victim, not living in that space of because I didn't have parents, then this is my outcome, right? Because every single day of our lives, everything that we have a choice. We get to choose what we're going to do in spite of where we've been or where we come from or how we grow up. And I know that sounds really hard to hear to the average person because there are a lot of people out here who would really disagree with me, and they would say, no, I didn't have a lot of the opportunities that a lot of people had. So I didn't have an opportunity to come out, or I didn't have an opportunity to become, or nobody told me that I could be anything outside of what I saw. And all of that could very much be true, right? Because a lot of that was my journey that I'm sharing with you now. I didn't have people speaking into my life telling me that I could become something that I didn't see. I didn't know that there was a world that existed outside of what I could see at one point of my life. All I knew was I didn't want what I saw. I didn't want the life that was presented to me, the life that was in front of me. I'm like, clearly, there has to be more to life than this. So I want you to know that you expanding your brain, expanding your mind to think beyond, giving yourself permission to dream, permission to think big, permission to see yourself in a different light than what you currently see or what you're currently exposed to, or even what's currently happened in front of you. A lot of times we don't see our parents go to college and make anything out of their life, and so we feel like that's not a life that we can have. We don't see our family come out of the mentality of, poverty or drinking and smoking and, that being the turn up and that being the good time and staying in the hood with all your friends and families and everybody staying, like we don't see life outside of that sometimes. And so because of that, we don't believe that we can have it. Sometimes we don't see life outside of people being mean, or people being traumatized, or people going through things, and then this is who they become. I went through this and now I have become this very mean, bitter, evil person because of the things that I've gone through. And so we automatically associate, if I go through this particular thing, this is what it's going to look like, because we don't see things lived out. And so when we don't see these things lived out, sometimes it feels like we don't have permission to go outside of what we see. But I want to encourage you that you do. You have permission to live a life outside of what you see. Because just because this is how you grew up, just because this is what you were exposed to, just because this is what you saw, does not mean that this is all that God has for you. Your life matters. And so I am here to encourage you in that. Even as telling my own journey, when I think about the choices that I had to make, when I think about the choice. So if you watched my episode from last week, I would love your take on it. I need you guys to go and give me some feedback. Make sure you're liking and subscribing and all of the things, so that this podcast can get into the algorithm of other people, and so that it can start getting ratings, okay? But if you watch my podcast from last week, then you heard me talk about the choice that I had to make when it came to marriage. I could choose to be in a relationship with someone, and I saw clear signs of like, yeah, I don't know. Or I could choose to see a life outside of what I had been exposed to, and that's the life that I chose. And so I'm not like honestly, guys, I think that my meeting my ex-husband and going down the path that I went through, I think all of that was according to God's plan. And it sounds ridiculous to the average person. I get it. It sounds crazy to the average person. I know. But I promise you, I believe that it was all a part of God's plan. Because there were things that I went through, there were things that happened to me while I was in that marriage, while I was on that particular season of my journey, that I am absolutely walking in now, helping other people. I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not had those particular experiences. It was necessary for me. And so I want you to think about your own life. I want you to think about your own journey. And I want you to think about, what are some of the things that I've gone through? What are some of the places that I've had to experience, or some of the seasons that I've had to experience within my own journey? Where is it showing up now? Like, is it showing up for me now? What is happening right now on this particular journey? Like, how can this be a light for somebody else? How can this be impactful? Like, God, what do you get out of this, me going through this? Those are questions that we ask. God, what do you get from this? Uh-oh. My headphone is slipping, guys. I'm sorry if you hear all that moving in the background. But like, what are you getting from this? What do you get from me going through this particular thing? Me going through this journey, me experiencing this. What do you get from this? Right? That's the question that we want to ask. That's the question that we literally need an answer to. And so when you're in your season, when you're on your journey, when you're going through things, I almost dare you to ask God that question. Like, God, what is it? What's coming out of this? Because there's never a season wasted. Like, you are never going to go through anything and it doesn't manifest in your life in some type of way. It's never going to happen. I would have never known that God would use me in the form of helping people to know who they are and helping people to know their identity, when clearly most of my life I walked around without one. There is no way that I could have ever even thought. And I'll take it even a step further to say, when the Lord started to reassure me of that, when the Lord started confirming this thing in my spirit, how easily it could have been for me to allow the enemy to be like, clearly that's not your path. Like, girl, you didn't even know who you were for so long. How you gonna help somebody else now? But God literally takes the foolish things to confound the wise. That's a real statement. And so God will take the very thing that the enemy tries to hold you captive in, and he will use it for his glory. All things work together for the good of those who love God. Romans 8 and 28 is literally one of my favorite scriptures for a reason. All things work together for the good of those who love God, for those who are the called according to his purpose. This isn't nothing that he just says in the Bible because we needed some space. They needed something to put in the Bible to take up some space. No, that is literally everything that you go through in your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that hurt, the things that don't make sense, the things that don't even look like you can come back from. All things work together. So God can take anything, literally anything, and use it for his glory. And so I want you to be encouraged in that. So as I left off on the podcast last week and I was kind of talking about my journey, and I was just talking about the choice that I made and how I feel like God used that for my good, right? Because I had no idea who I was. I mean, no idea of who I was. Everything that my ex-husband was representing in that moment for me were things that I longed for. And so it was literally like standing at the crossroad. I think I said this in my last episode. It's like standing at the crossroad, and I can clearly go down this path where I can see a lot of things, but I can also see the things that I do desire. Or I can go down this other path that clearly looks like where I just came from by myself, but now I'll be going on this path with my kid. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to go backwards. I felt like this was my way out. Like when you literally feel hopeless, right? You feel like this can be your way to another life. And that is how I felt. I literally felt like this is my way to another life. This is my way out for me and for my son. And I'm going to take it. Clearly, I'm going to take it. I mean, clearly, I'm going to take it. And that's what I did. And so I remember just being on that journey, and I remember it being hard, right? Because I can remember after getting married, not long after getting married, I found something in John's phone. Remember, his name is John. That's what we're calling him. I found something in John's phone. And I was devastated. Because in my mind, I'm like, oh my God. Here's my white picket fence. Here's my happily ever after. Here's all of the things that I clearly want, like right in front of me in this message. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to walk away from all of the things that I feel like I'm working so hard for? I just got here. That's how I felt, right? Like I just got here. There is no way. What am I going to do with it? And I want to talk about leading up to, because it was hard. It was very hard. There were moments, and I mentioned in my last podcast how half of John's family didn't attend our wedding. Well, they did not attend our wedding because they had something else going on. Half of them just didn't attend because they didn't like me. They didn't want us to get married. They did not approve. So it was a fight from the beginning. Let me be very clear. It was a fight from the beginning. I felt like I was trying to outlive some of the past mistakes or some of the past choices that even some of my parents and grandparents had, made. My mother's mom, she drank really bad. And I can remember John's mom saying, like, those things in her family, those traits in her family, like, you can't marry into that. Like, she's going to be like them. This may be something that you experience from her, like from them. And so I feel like I was always trying to prove that I'm not like that. That's not my life. Like I I don't know. So it was a battle from the beginning. But leading up into that, when I'm faced with this, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? And so clearly, because I had just got here, there is no way that I'm walking out the door. And then what do we do whenever and I don't know how many of you can actually relate to infidelity or relate to going through something like that, but we internalize it as if it's a us problem. And so for a long time, I internalized John's infidelity as if it was my fault. What are you doing, Sharon? What aren't you doing, Sharon? Like, I'm doing all of the things in my brain. Like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I cook, I clean, I have sex, like, what else can I do? Right? Like, I'm making sure that things are good. I feel like I'm being a good wife. Like, what is it that I can do? So then we start to look at ourselves like, okay, do you say too much? Can you say less? Do you need to say more? Do you not need to? It's almost like a point where you get to when you getting you internalize so badly that you start to lose yourself because you're coming out of yourself trying to clearly be something for someone else, but you don't know what you're trying to be. You're trying to be something, but you don't know what that is. You have no idea what it is that you're trying to be. All you know is that you're trying to show up and be something or be someone. And so for years I did. And I can remember even moments when I feel like clearly it's never going to stop because I'm allowing it at this point. But like, what's wrong with me? What am I going through that I'm allowing this to keep happening? Right? And so I remember going to marriage counseling, and I think we went for the first time, and we went to marriage counseling, and clearly John didn't like the counselor, right? He was like, yeah, no, this is a little too close to home for me. I feel like he knows my family. Yeah, not going to work for me. Okay. So the counselor referred us out, and he referred us to someone else that neither one of us knew. Got there, John didn't like him either. Okay? So clearly at this point, John just don't like counseling. Let's be very clear. But something happened to me with this counselor. And even though John left, I didn't. I stayed. And I went to counseling for me. And counseling literally changed my life. It changed my life. It started helping me to figure out some of the things that I was dealing with. Like all of the internalizing that I'm doing towards myself as if I'm an issue, as if I'm the problem, it started helping me to clearly get out of that. Figure out what's happening, figure out the why. Why is this happening? Why am I saying this? Why do I feel this way? And it started helping me to identify who Sharon was. Because clearly, even in this marriage, being John's wife, I still didn't know who Sharon was. Sharon's identity was, I'm a wife. I'm John's wife. But if you take away John and you take away wife, what's left? Who is Sharon? I had no idea. I had no idea. And so I can remember after going to this counselor, and I started shifting even in my prayers. And like, I started praying less for John and less for God to change John and less for God to show John my heart and to show John that. And I started getting really selfish in my prayers and saying, God, change me. Like, I want to be different. I want to be who you're calling me to be. And I feel like if I do what I'm supposed to do, then John will come along. Clearly, we're married. If I get better, John is going to get better because he's going to see me getting better. So at this point, I'm like, God, help me to be better. And that became my prayer. That's the way that I prayed. That's how I shifted. That's how I believed. God, make me better. Help me to be better. And when I started praying prayers differently, God started doing a different thing inside of me. And I could feel it. I could feel it. But even though things around me were, I mean, things inside of me were happening and they were changing, things around me were not. I was still being judged. Clearly, I don't know why I'm being judged. John is still treating me as if we're not on the same team sometimes. Like, I didn't feel protection from John's family, because John's family was cruel. We went to church with him. His mom was a pastor. There were times when his mom would stand in that pulpit and clearly preach right about me. And 95% of the church's family, so everybody in church know exactly who she's talking about. And John would just sit there and he wouldn't say anything. And I would be crushed. And I can remember times when I would be sitting in that service and I would clearly be heartbroken. And John would be up there singing and playing and doing praise and worship, and people will be falling out and people will be crying and people will be going to the altar getting delivered. And I was sitting there in my seat like, clearly, God, there is something wrong with me. How can John have this kind of impact on people? And I know what's happening behind the scenes. And I only wanted to bring that out because I think sometimes we get so caught up in the gift that comes without repentance. And we get so caught up in what other people are doing to the point where we make it our focus. Like, God, they're not living right. How can this be happening for them? And we're focused on the wrong things because God has his way. But I wasn't in that space to understand that yet. Like, I'm still coming into this thing. And like, God, I can clearly see you changing me, but John ain't changing. I don't know if I'm impactful for the people because that ain't my ministry, right? But I feel like people are always judging me and people are always like pushing me away or whatever the case may be. And it's like that's the total opposite for him. And it could have been one of two things, really, because sometimes God hides you until he's ready to pull you out. Like, God will hide you in a season until he's ready to pull you out. And then two, it's like, it's not my job to focus on what's happening with John in that sense. I'm not the corrector. I'm not the ruler. I'm not God. And so I want to encourage you when you see that, because it's easy for us to do. Sometimes we can see it and we can see it happening to people and we feel like life is so unfair and this is not right. And it shifts the focus on us being the better version of ourselves. And I want to encourage you not to do that. Not to place your focus on someone else to the point where it hinders your growth in being better, because that's a distraction, John 10:10, and that's exactly what the enemy wants. He wants to shift your focus so you're no longer focusing on you and becoming better and what God wants to do in you, but you're putting all your focus, all your time, all your attention, and all your energy into something or someone else, and then clearly you're off track. I don't know. That's a plug, I guess, because I don't even know if I was going there, but I just let the Lord flow. I want you to shift your focus if that's what you're doing. But I can just remember going through these things. And there were moments when, people would start to see a shift in me. And like John's mom and I, we weren't always at odds. Like we were like the roller coaster. We would be up and down and up and down and upside and backwards and under and on top. Like we had moments. And so there were moments when she would start speaking things over me and speaking things into me and just telling me, like, I can see God doing something inside of you. God is preparing you to be a first lady. And I'm like, well, clearly John is getting his life together because he about to be a preacher. So I know that all of this is not in vain, right? I know that all of this is not in vain. I know that the work that I am putting in, the prayers that I am putting in, all of this is not in vain. And I can even go as far as to say, like, listen, honey, there were times when I be over here and anoint the pillows, I'll be anointing the shoes, I'm anointing the tires on the car. Like, I was one of them girls where I'm like, Lord, if you put us together, you're going to bless this marriage. Like, I just believe it. And it is going to get to the place where you're calling it to be. Like, the devil is a liar. You cannot have it. And I was so there that all of the things that were happening, it was almost like I was just ignoring those things because I'm focused on the bigger picture. And I mean, that can be good and bad, right? Because clearly, if God speaks something to you, no matter what it looks like, if God said it, it's coming to pass, right? But then God gives us wisdom and God gives us common sense. And common sense and spirituality always don't go together. They don't always go together. But God gives us wisdom. Wisdom goes with God. And he will give us wisdom in a thing. And it's up to us to take heed to the wisdom. Right? I guess that's another plug. I don't know. But we have to take heed to the wisdom. We have to take heed to the wisdom that God gives. And so my focus was on this, like, God, this is it. And I can even remember times when I was judgmental to other people's situation. Because at one point, I thought John shifted. Oh my goodness, things had took a turn. John was doing so much better. I hadn't had any infidelity, anything in a while. So at that point, I took our doing good as a way to say, okay, like clearly this is what you can do. Now I can help the other women. Like, honey, no. Don't put up with that. This is what you need to do. Almost like I'm giving like imposter syndrome because clearly I'm not even living the life in which I'm thinking. And I don't even know why I'm bringing this out because I don't know how imperative this is to the journey. But I do want you to know that there are moments when we clearly know that our stuff stinks. And because we do, we impose it on other people. And we try to make other people feel bad for their choices and decisions. Like clearly I had a couple that I knew all of the things and I'd be like, yeah, I would walk away. There's no way I would do that when clearly I was in a situation that I couldn't even walk away from. And it's like you get heightened senses to someone else's situation when you're in your own situation that you don't even have the courage to get out of. And that's what was happening to me. I mean, at one point in time, and John and I were married for almost 15 years. So this is a synopsis of 15 years before I get to, the leading of our divorce, which was the major part of my journey. But over the course of almost 15 years, we were married for such a long time. And so I can remember, and our marriage, good and bad, ups and downs, because marriage is seasonal. I get it. But there was a point in my marriage where I wasn't even in love with John anymore. I wasn't in love with him anymore. I loved him. He was still my husband. He was the father of our three children. But I was not in love with him. And I don't even know if I had like the wife love for him as much as I did before. Our marriage took such a turn. I think Everybody's marriage took a turn from COVID, right? Our marriage actually went up from COVID. So I can remember, after having my daughter, which was, about 2 years before COVID, two and a half years before COVID or so. And that was the last time I heard about infidelity from John, around the time when I gave birth to our last kid. And at that point, I was just like, you know what? Like, clearly, this is just who he is. I have to accept the fact that this is who he is, or I have to be willing to let it go. And if I can just let me tell you, and I want to encourage you, because this is where I was. There were moments in my life where I felt like my life would have been so much better if I was brought up in a home with both my parents. I think I said this before on one of my other episodes. And so I would fight, sometimes tooth and nails, to make sure that I am keeping my children in this two-parent home, because I need them to have the best foundation possible, not even understanding that the toxicity that was they were being exposed to was not healthy. Most of the things I did without John, he wasn't present. He lived in the house, but he wasn't present. Most of the things I did without John, most of the things. I took my kids on dates, most of our activities, most of our play dates, most of the birthday parties. Almost everything was being done without John. And then if it was our kids' parties, John would be there, and then he would have to leave because he was always working. That was his life. He was always working. And so clearly, I was showing my children something without showing them something, because I'm thinking that as long as they come up in this two-parent home, they're going to be totally fine, when it wasn't even producing the love or the examples of the love that they needed to see in order for them not to adapt some of the same trauma that they were exposed to. And so we think that this is what we're working towards so much. And so at one point I'm like, as long as these kids grow up, they got their parents in the house, I don't have to worry about it. I mean, who knows where John and I will be by the time our third child is graduating from high school, going to college. That was in my brain, which was the dumbest thing, because it's like, clearly you're willing to give up your entire life and your happiness, almost like you feel like you don't deserve it. And so there are moments in our life when we've been through things, and we've been through so much, because clearly I was one of the ones who was like, I've been going through since I was a child. When I get married, life is going to be different. And then when I started going through in my marriage, I had then adapted the mentality that I'm always going to be going through. I was just like, clearly, I am always going to have to fight some type of battle. I don't understand it. I don't think it's fair. I think life is unfair. I think God is unfair, but this is what it is, and I have to just deal with it. And my bishop said something yesterday, and it hit home for me, because he said, we look at God to be fair, and God's not fair. God is just. And I think a lot of times we want fairness in life, and life isn't fair, and God isn't fair. God is just. And we have to be okay with that. And so I can remember thinking, like, I am forfeiting my own happiness and what I believe that I deserve. There were moments when I would lay in the bed and be like, I just want to be loved. Like, God, you made me this way. Because there were moments in my marriage where John would make me feel like I was hard to love. I wanted too much. I required too much. I always had something to say, because clearly my mouth was mouthing. Let me be very clear, okay? I will not lie to you and say that it was not. Proverbs had to get me all the way together. Thank God for Jesus, and thank God for Jesus and Jesus for wisdom, okay? Because Proverbs got me all the way together. My mouth was it was out of control sometimes. I was that girl that felt like if it's right, I'm supposed to say it. Well, clearly you're not supposed to say everything that you want to say, even if it's right. But I didn't have the wisdom of that in the beginning of my marriage, so I didn't know. I didn't know that. And there were times where I would say whatever I felt. And I'm thinking in my brain that if I say it and he hears it clearly, he's going to jump on board. And clearly, he would not. He would go the other direction because it wasn't what he was trying to hear. But I was forfeiting a lot of my own happiness. I was forfeiting a lot of things in my life in order to continue with this picture of what it was that I thought that I wanted. And so after that infidelity, I was clear like, this is who he is. I'm just going to focus on me. And that's what I started to do. I got into my Bible. I got into, just praying and sitting at the feet of Jesus. And God started working with me on identity. Who are you was the very first thing that God gave me. And when he gave it to me, it hit me like a ton of bricks. God gave me some affirmations that I still have to this day. And this has been about 8 years or more ago. God gave me affirmations that I still have to this very day. And I can remember having those affirmations and I plastered them all over my bedroom wall on my side of the room. And every day I would sit up on the side of my bed and I would read these affirmations off until one day something clicked and I no longer had to read them because they was becoming a part of who I was. God was clearly doing something in me that I couldn't explain, and I even wrote my first book because of it. Pain for Purpose. You can get that anywhere books are sold. And I remember writing that book and I started doing things and life was starting to look up and life was starting to look different for me. And I was so excited about the things that were happening. Now John and I were still having our things. We weren't having any infidelity things, but we would still have our things here and there. But my focus was no longer on our marriage. It wasn't on making this marriage work. Clearly, this marriage is going to be what it is at this point. My focus was me. My focus was my children, making sure that my children were happy, making sure that my children were healthy to the ability that I knew how to have them healthy at that point, making sure that I was happy and healthy. That's what I had. I started drinking smoothies. I started losing some weight because I was very heavy at that point. I was carrying a lot of unnecessary weight, a lot of weight. And so I dropped about 50 pounds or more. And so I remember dropping that weight, starting to feel better about me, starting to feel more confident in who I was. And I'm walking in this confidence and I'm walking in this authority that God has given me. I remember that. And so I remember even walking away from his church. It came to the point where I knew that this is what the Lord had said. And I had left the church before, but our marriage took a turn for the worst, honey. And I heard the Lord say, go back. I went back so that we could build our foundation, so that we could get stronger as husband and wife. And we did, but this time I wasn't going back. So I left his church. Me and the kids started going to a different church that I am still currently a part of today. Absolutely love my church. Let me be very clear. And things were looking different. COVID came and shut everything down, and John and I were in the house. And it's the funniest thing because a lot of people, mental health and marriages and all of the things really were struggling during COVID. We were the opposite. Like God was clearly with us the entire time. Like I was at home because the kids were at home and I was working for someone. They were pregnant and I couldn't be around them because John was clearly still working, but I was still getting, paid. So I could stay home. John was still going to work, but he would go to work and he would come right back home. Like it was good. It was good for us. We got so much closer. We had conversations that we probably hadn't had in years. We were literally cooking together. We were in such a different space. During COVID, we bought another house and we moved. into a different area. Like it was so many things happening for us with COVID. It was the upside for us. But then once COVID was over and things started to shut back, I mean, things started to open back up, so did John. And John started to get out, and John started to do what John wanted to do again. And it was not good for either one of us. It was a moment in my life where I made a video in my phone. I still have this video in my phone to this very day. And in this particular video, I said, John and I are going to get a divorce. I don't know when. I don't know how it's going to happen. But I now know that John and I are not going to be together forever. And it was like a revelation. It was almost like a revelation of what was to come. And it happened in the weirdest way. I never could have predicted it to happen the way that it happened. And I'm definitely going to go into the details of all of that on the next episode. But it happened in the weirdest way. And just so happened, I made that video clearly about maybe 1 year and 1 month before it actually happened. And it was to that point where I didn't see it coming. I didn't know that it was going to happen. No one could have ever even told me. But I did know that once I got to that place where I was starting to want to come out of character, I was starting to want to do something different that was outside of me, that this was no longer a healthy situation for me. And so I'm saying that because I want you to think about moments, right? I want you to think about moments in your life where you have literally been wanting to, like, you're in a situation, but the situation is not bringing the best out of you, it is bringing the worst out of you. Think about situations where you have been in or that you are currently in that makes you want to come outside of who you are. It makes you want to come out of your character. It makes you want to do something that is clearly not who you are. I want you to think about those situations, because whenever you're at that particular place, you have to be willing to make a decision. You have to be willing to say, God, is this the place that you would have me? Is this where I am supposed to be? What is happening here? What are we supposed to be doing? You have to be willing to ask that question. When I got to that particular place where I was ready to step outside, and I'm not a cheater. I'm not a cheater. I was with John clearly for 20 years, and I never cheated. I thought about it. I absolutely thought about it, but I never acted on it. I never actually acted on it. But it was to a point where I thought about it and I was gonna act on it. The Lord is so strategic in all of his ways. He's so very strategic in all of his ways. Because I had an ex that I would talk to every now and again and just keep in contact with, but it wasn't anything outside of the norm until a time. And we would just have conversations about different things. He knew that I was married. He always knew that I was married. And he always knew that there would never be an opportunity for he and I, because I was not that girl. But then there came a time where I opened up a door that I should have left closed. I had always made that very clear that I was not that girl and that I wouldn't do that. And so he always knew that he couldn't walk through that door, even if he would easily knock on it from time to time. Well, there was one time that he knocked on the door and I let him in. I opened up the door to let him come through. And we had conversations about meeting up. We had conversations about, this is not going to be a regular thing. This might be a one and done. This might just, I don't know. Let's see how it goes and where it goes from here. Clearly, this is not a relationship. This is just sex, right? Like, that sounds so crazy when I say it now. But I was at that place where I was no longer operating in my own character because it is clearly out of my character to cheat. It's not who I am. I don't have a desire to do that. I've never had a desire to do that. When I'm with you, I'm with you. I am loyal to the end. That is who I am. But when I got to that place, I knew that this was no longer healthy for me. And I'm like, God, I don't like it here. Like, clearly, I'm not okay here. I don't know what to do. But God, I know that you'll forgive me. That's the one thing that I know. I know that you will forgive me. And God, I literally don't want to do it, but I feel lonely in my marriage. I feel like I want more in my marriage than John is willing to give. And I am tired because at this point, and I want to be very clear and I want to paint this picture. And at this particular point in our marriage, we were both going in separate directions. It was very clear that we were no longer on the same page. We weren't going to church together anymore. John was kind of living his life. I was kind of living mine. We weren't even doing a lot of things together outside of living in the house. Like we would still do, like even when it came down to holidays, like Thanksgiving is my holiday. I absolutely love Thanksgiving. Always have. Me and my best friend at the time would always get together on Thanksgiving and we would swap houses. One time it's at her house, one time it's at my house. And it got to the point where John would come if it's at her house or even if it's at our house. John would be there in the beginning and then he would get up and leave and go to his mom's house. And we didn't never go with him because if we're hosting at our house, clearly we're not leaving to go to John's parents' house. Just like if we're at my best friend's house, we're not leaving because this is something that we do. It's one holiday. But John was at the point where he wasn't even willing to compromise and say, okay, we'll spend Thanksgiving here and then Christmas will be here. He wanted everything to be his way. And so it got to a point where we were no longer even doing holidays together. That's how bad it got. But we're still painting this picture that our marriage is what it is. We're still living in the house. We're still showing up. I'm still helping and encouraging women who are going through in their marriage. Clearly, I can help someone else. I just can't help myself at this moment because I don't know what else to do. So it got to that point where we were living separate lives. So I just wanted to paint the picture of what that really looked like when I got to that place of like, I am going to cheat on John. Like, and it was weird even saying it out of my mouth. I remember telling my best friend, and she's like, there's no way. And I'm like, but there is. And she's like, you're not going to do it. And I'm like, no, I really am. Like, we've already chose a date. And she's like, I don't believe it. Because it was so out of my character that there is no way that anybody would have ever even saw this coming from me. It was out of my character. It was not who I was at all. Not at all. But it got to that point where I chose a date to do it and I said, this is the date that I'm going to do it. Well, prior to that particular date coming, John gets sick. It's so weird. And I say that God is so intentionally strategic. I'm not saying that God necessarily made John sick in that moment, but I believe that God loves me so much that he wanted to protect me from me. He wanted to protect me from me. And at that point, he's like, Sharon, this is clearly not who you are. This is clearly not what you're about. This is clearly not what you really want to do. But putting yourself in a predicament to where you're already planning a date to show up at a place, like, yeah, I'm gonna put a stop to that. I believe that. Like, and people could feel differently about that, and I'm okay with that. But I believe that my father absolutely loves me. When he say ram in the bush, it's a real thing. Like, there will be a ram in the bush if you really want to get out. But you gotta be willing to take God's out. And I wanted his out because I really didn't want to do it, but I was clearly going to do it if it came down to it. And I chose a date to do it. But I remember John getting sick before that. And it happened so fast. It happened so fast. And I'm going to start this and then I'm going to stop here and then we'll be able to pick up from the next episode. But I remember John getting sick and it started out very simple. It was like a simple something. And I remember John was in a car wreck a couple of years ago, maybe 10, 14 years ago or so now. It was a long time ago now. And when he was in this car wreck, it really had an effect on his leg. And so this one particular leg on John's body just never wanted to do right. Like, it would give him problems, it would be sore sometimes, it would swell up sometimes. Like, he was thrown out of a vehicle before. Clearly God has such a call on John's life, and I am still praying that God will get the glory out of John's life in its entirety, because the enemy has tried to take him away from here so many times. But John was in a car wreck and John got thrown out of the vehicle and something clearly went through this particular leg. And so he had like a hole in the leg. And so he's always had problems from this leg. Well, I can remember him waking up one morning and we're in the kitchen and everybody's getting ready to leave. And he's asking, like, he felt like he was getting bit on the leg. Like he was getting like these bite marks almost on this one particular leg. And he was like, "Do you feel like you was getting bit in the bed?" And I'm like, "No, I'm all right. You all right?" And I could see like it was like these little bites on his leg, right near his ankle almost. And so I was like, "Well, just go to the doctor. Let's just go to the doctor. Let's just make sure everything's okay." And so John went to the doctor and he came back and he was like, "Oh, they think I have an infection in the leg. So they gave me an antibiotic." And I'm like, "Okay." So they gave John an antibiotic, but clearly you could see that this leg was giving him more problems than before. And it was to a point where, he was limping and he was just in a lot of pain. And this was outside of the norm for him with this leg. Like he would still push himself on this leg. And you could tell whenever the leg was like given, like the leg was sore or something, because it would always swell up. And, you could see when he needed to rest it. But this was different. Like this leg was like almost like swollen to the point of popping, it looked like. And the bite marks that once started on his ankle they kind of went up the leg, and he was in so much pain from the limping to the almost like dragging of the leg to a certain extent, is the amount of pain that he was in when it came to this leg. And so it was definitely a different situation. Now, to the extent of how different it was going to be, I had no idea, but I definitely knew that there was something different about this particular situation than before. um and so John was taking his antibiotic, and then one morning he woke up and he was in such severe pain. And he was like, I'm just going to go to work. I'm just going to sit at my desk. I'm not going to be out on the floor. Um, and I said, "John, I just don't think you should go to work today. I think you should just stay home today. I don't think you should go. I think you should really just sit it out." But John clearly was not listening to me. He was wanting to do it anyway. So he pressed his way and he went to work. And when he got to work, he was in so much pain that he was in tears. And so he ended up leaving work, going to the ER, And when he got to the ER, they admitted him, and they admitted him for about 2.5 to 3 weeks. John walked in that hospital and got admitted, but he couldn't walk out. I'm going to stop right there so that we can catch up on the next episode and I can go a little bit further with you into this. Guys, thank you so much for just hearing my story and hearing my journey. Again, as I will after every single episode, I want you to take a look at your own journey. I want you to stop and observe your journey. Where are you in your journey? Where are you in your process? What is God wanting to do? What is God trying to do through you? I want you to look at your story as not just a story, but I want you to look at it as your journey to the identity and who God has called you to be. Again, I am Sharon Tillman. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And until next time, I love you guys for real.